Welcome to Instant Deck Techs. The aim of this series is to give you a short, concise guide on how to build a certain deck. It won't cover every card, but we'll go through all the categories and go over the types of cards needed to make the deck work. Any card mentioned will be down in the description below. The commander of this deck is Omnath Locus of Mana. It is 2 and a green for a 1/1 legendary creature, Elemental. It has you don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. Omnath Locus of Mana gets +1/+1 for each unspent green mana that you have. With this deck, we're going big and we're going green. At times, this may seem like an excessive amount of mana, but trust me, it's all necessary. With the ungodly amount of mana we will be making, we will use Omnath as a battery, and putting into it every bit of extra mana that we can create. With this, we'll have some very explosive turns, and we'll play some extremely large green spells to win the game. There will also be a devotion sub-theme in the deck as well. The first section of the deck will be the ramp. We want to generate as much mana as possible in this deck. Any spare mana will be stored in Omnath, so itself can become a lethal threat. The first batch will be mana dorks. We want to run cheap creatures that tap for mana, and preferably ones with a very low CMC. To mix up our ramp, we will also run some enchantments that add to the amount of mana we can create. These will also help to our devotion count. For the final part of the ramp, I would recommend running some effects that brings land into play from the deck. We won't need as many of these, and I would recommend splitting it up so half your ramp is dorks, a quarter is enchantments, and a quarter is effects like these. The reason for this is that it diversifies the type of ramp we have, so it's not all blown out by a board wipe, but it also allows us to still run overrun style effects to turn our mana dorks into a win condition later in the game. One of the reasons for running so many permanents that add mana is so that when they're on the battlefield, they add to our devotion count. If you have access to these types of effects that add mana based on our devotion, then I would want to run them. But the ramp doesn't actually stop there. We want to run some effects that either untap our lands or our dorks so we can add even more mana to the mana pool. We will also run some effects that double or even triple the amount of mana that our permanents produce. This will take our previous mana production to a whole new level. In total, we want between 8 and 12 effects that while don't themselves make mana, but instead add to the amount of mana that we can create. With the mana sorted, we want to make sure that we have plenty of cards in our hand so we have things to do. Look for effects that trigger when creatures come into play, or cards that will scale with our board state. Also, as Omnath is relatively cheap in mana, if we manage to accumulate a lot of mana, we can sack it to one of these effects, draw a ton of cards, and then replay Omnath. Being able to give our spells flash will mean that we're better equipped to react to our opponents. As some of the untap effects will give us extra mana on our opponent's turns as well, it'll mean that we will always be one step ahead of them. We also want to run some effects to make sure that Omnath, and then also the rest of our board, is protected. The last thing we want is to put all this effort into making Omnath huge, only for it to die to a Doomblade. I'd want to run at least 2 to 6 bits of protection, but maybe run more if your meta plays more removal. For the interaction in the deck, I would want to run effects that deal with as wide range of threats as possible. Effects on creatures and enchantments will be very good at adding to our devotion as well, but I think something like Oblivion Stone has a good place in the deck, as we can navigate it so that the key cards on our board won't die. We also want to run some cards to cheat some of our big threats out of our deck. There are a variety of these effects. They vary in terms of budget and mana cost. I'm personally a big fan of Wild Pair and Magus of the Order as good budget options, but run the best ones that you have available to you. When it comes to winning the game, the first part is the classic Overrun and Crater Hoof style effects. I really like Kamal in this deck, but like the cheats, run the best ones that you have available to you. And then also you can run the biggest of creatures that green has to offer. For efficiency, you can also run some Hydras with X in their casting costs, but really you can play whatever takes your fancy in this slot. If it's big and hits like a truck, then it has a place in this deck. For some one-shot instant board state, I'd also recommend running Genesis Wave, to unload all that mana into one go and dump our library into play. And then if things get grindy, Praetor's Council will return everything in our graveyard back to our hand, so we can do it all over again. Also, Whisper Silk Cloak makes our juiced up Omnath a lethal threat, so we can swing through for a commander damage win. And then if you're a fan of alternate win conditions, then you can also win a game with a Helix Pinnacle. As we're mono-coloured, you can run a number of utility lands to fill gaps in the deck. Look for things that our deck is missing, such as Graveyard Hate and ways of raising our hand size. I also like the cycling lands in a mono-coloured deck, as they help smooth out our draws and get us to a point where we can start popping off. This video was a request from a viewer. The next couple of deck techs you will see will also be from requests in the comments. If you have a deck you'd like to see, please let us know. If you like the look of those, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.